We got news, ladies and gentlemen. We have information on the Trump indictment. Breaking: Trump indicted reportedly on 34 counts related to falsifying business records. The indictment stems from Trump allegedly falsifying records concerning a $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels, in 2016. CNN reports they were informed of the number of indictments by an unnamed source. So we take that with a grain of salt. Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty, yada, yada, yada. Let's play the clip from CNN. Do we have audio here?
My source is that this is 34 counts of falsification of business records, which is probably a lot of charges involving each document, each thing that was submitted as a separate count in a couple of matters.
Okay, well, that's it.
Is that like if he's like, yeah, and then he responds?
It has to be more than that.
More than what?
It has to be more than just counts of falsifying business records, I think. It has to be something election related to keep it to go past the misdemeanor thing, I think.
I'm gonna agree. I think it's definitely gonna be more than just the Stormy Daniels thing.
Falsifying business records, is that like if they're in an email chain and he's like, are you sure? And then he sends the email, he's like, responds, yes. And then he's like, okay, then is that 3 counts?
My guess is gonna be that I think he was paid back. Wasn't it over a year period or a 2-year period? The falsifying business record, like let's say that I paid you bi-weekly over an entire year, right? It would be 26 different payments that I'm lying about. So it'd probably be 26 separate counts of falsifying records. That'd be my guess. But again, it has to be more than just falsifying records because that's only a misdemeanor and the statute of limitations expired. And it's a fucking misdemeanor. Why would we charge an ex-president over a misdemeanor? That's the most insane thing. So it has to be something different.
From conservatives.
It has to be something more than that. It has to be something more than that. But
I agree. I think it's gonna be worse than people think. Right now, everyone's saying it's the Stormy Daniels thing. I bet it's gonna be something else.
Something completely different.
I don't know about completely different, but it's going to be...
It's got to be related to like campaign fund misappropriation or
the question
something.
Is, will it be dubious or will it be questionable or will it be airtight? You know what I mean? Yeah. I kind of feel like it's probably going to be dubious. I mean, Ukraine Gate as it was and Mueller and Russia and all that stuff did not pan out. I have very little...
What do you, in terms of indictments, there are a lot of good indictments that came from the Mueller investigation.
No, I mean, like, Trump isn't a Russian spy. He wasn't working with the Soviets.
Oh, probably.
Nothing was born of those things. You know what I mean? I feel like this is just like, they're going to spin their wheels. Trump's going to fundraise off it. He's going to raise record amounts of money. There's going to be a mug shot that will turn into T-shirts. People will get rich off of it. Donald Trump will win the election in 2024, and then we'll not even talk about this moment later on.
Does this kind of thing give people the right to go deeper into his life and look for things and serve subpoenas and warrants and things? To like look at emails from 20 years ago? Does it open up old?
I would hope that prosecutors are being intelligent when it comes to charging somebody that's going to run for president. It's not even the fact that he's a former president, it's that he's going to run for president. The absolute worst case scenario for the health of this country is that Donald Trump gets indicted, charged, and convicted of something that's not really that big of a deal that somehow inhibits his ability to run for office. Because now you've justified every single conservative that thinks that the system is trying to keep him out using judicial means. The left doesn't even get to feel good. Because like, let's be honest, let's say he goes to jail for something really stupid, like lying about, paying off a porn star. Like, you don't even feel good. I wanted him to go down for like the P tapes for the Putin stuff, right? Not for this bullshit. So, or BS. So, I hope they're sitting at something good. Otherwise, they have to realize they're making the entire United States look like a joke.
I don't think there's going to be anything there. I mean, it's been years. They've known about this for years, and they've not done anything. So it really just feels politically expedient.
And they just disbanded the grand jury 2 days ago or something for a month.
Today, they announced it was going on break for a month, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, by the way.
That's so weird. I have a question for you, Stephen. If it's kind of off topic, but it's somewhat on topic. Like this, I'm talking about the war in Ukraine and the Russian war. What do you think is the solution to ending this or to the future?
Probably. Well, wait, hold on. First question is, how do you feel about the war in Ukraine?
I'm happy Ukraine is winning. I hope they get back Crimea. Fuck Russia.
So what do you think would be a solution to make that happen?
Ukraine winning the war and getting back Crimea and saying fuck Russia.
What's define winning the war?
Getting back Crimea. Having their borders restored to what they were in 1991 when they broke off from the Soviet Union and when the entire world recognized the country as having the borders that it did. That included the Donbass and included Crimea.
Oh man, well, there's a lot of people. Some of my friends think that same thing.
What's the, I suppose, justification for U.S. involvement?
Justification for U.S. involvement is probably that like the stability of Europe is potentially at risk, that we are seeing an actor engaged in actions that haven't happened in decades, where one sovereign state invades another sovereign state to steal territory from them. It's just something that we don't really see around the world anymore, especially in Europe. And I think that the opposition to that should be led by the United States. I think it's important for us to be seen as a leader of the world to do that.
Would you be in favor of a similar military response if it came to Taiwan?
Oh, Taiwan and Hong Kong are so much more complicated, and I'm not well versed enough in the history to know if I would feel the same for that.
The stability
Taiwan,
of Southeast
maybe,
Asia
but-
and the region, you know what I mean?
True, but I think that our
events.
responsibility, the presence we have, and the relationships we have with Southeast Asia. I mean, we do have good relationships with South Korea and Japan, but it's different than Europe. But I would have to read up way more on Taiwanese history and the deals that China has carved out with respecting the autonomy of Taiwan to know if I would feel the same way about defending them militarily versus Ukraine. But I feel very strongly about Ukraine, understanding the Ukrainian history and everything, that their borders should be respected.
Do you think the $100 billion price tag is justified?
I think a really big price tag is justified. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and argue to know the difference between like 100 billion versus 1 trillion versus 500 billion dollars, but I think that it is worth it for the United States to be making heavy investments into the security of Europe. I think that position that we have as like the leader of the Western world and leading those efforts to protect Ukraine is really important.
Would you go to Ukraine and fight the Russians?
Fuck no.
Would you send other people's kids there to fight Russians?
U.S. troops in Ukraine fighting Russians is probably something I would not support.
Well, what about special forces doing operations to assist Ukrainians?
I don't think so.
Well, what about?
I'd have to think a lot. Well, like, what does special forces mean? Like, if we're talking about like people going over to like train troops, maybe. Like, for instance, if we're sending weapon systems over there and we're sending troops over there to train them use those weapon systems, that might be important so that those weapon systems don't misfire or they're crashing planes up in a
And they
pole or
did.
some shit. They did do it one time.
yeah.
Yes, they did.
What about the U.S. using reconnaissance measures and surveillance to provide intelligence to the Ukrainians, to then have the Ukrainians use the weapons we provided to, say, sink the Russian flagship in the Black Sea?
I think so far, I think that's been fair game. I think that a lot of people around the world share intelligence, and that's probably just a given at this point. Us sharing intelligence with Ukraine is probably no different than China or Russia sharing intel with each other as well.
What about former U.S. military, now veterans, fighting on the ground in Ukraine using U.S. intelligence, U.S. weapons, and U.S. funding to assist Ukrainians in, say, like sinking ships and stuff
I think
like that?
it sounds silly, but I think there is a distinction that they are former U.S. military. The scary part about U.S. troops and Russian troops shooting at each other is the potential for escalation into all of us getting blown up. But if a former U.S. military person gets killed by a Russian troop, that's a Ukrainian soldier, that former U.S., it is what it is.
Do you
but
really
it's-
think Russia is going like, well, they're not really a U.S. military, so we're not going to do anything about it?
Absolutely.
I disagree.
I think there's
they just-
there's a huge difference between that guy used to be part of the U.S. military who's fighting Ukraine versus there are armed U.S. troops on the ground. There's a whole escalatory pathway for U.S. soldiers in
you think
Ukraine.
Putin cares?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, they just took down one of our drones, whether it was an accident or not. They did a fuel spray on it.
Sure.
And then clipped
and we
it.
do dumb shit like that to each other sometimes when it happens, but they're having uniformed U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine would be a massive escalation.
Do you think Russia is going to allow Ukraine to win?
Is Russia going to allow Ukraine to win? Well, I mean, they've allowed them to get as far as they have so far.
But now they're positioning nukes north of Ukraine and Belarus.
I heard the strategic nuclear weapons being moved into Belarus. I don't know why. I don't know if that's posturing.
The
but
UK is deploying depleted uranium tank busters, which are radioactive. Russia responded by saying, "We warned you that if you use depleted uranium, that's nuclear escalation." And now they're moving nukes.
Sure, but
into the
they've been
region.
talking about nuclear escalation for like 2
But
years.
then
Like,
they
they've been-
did it, and now Russia is sending nukes into the region.
Sure, they into Belarus, yeah, but like, are they actually going to start using? I don't think Russia is
Yes.
going to. I don't think so. I don't think Russia's going to use.
The mistake people make is they assume nuke means 100 megaton ICBMs.
It doesn't happen. Even
Because
strategic nuclear weapons, I think, would be
nuclear artillery.
unbelievable. Depleted uranium is different than firing nukes.
No, I'm talking
Different than
about
explosives.
I'm talking about nuclear shells. I'm talking about.
I don't think they're going to be
small
firing
yield.
nuclear shells. I don't think they'll be firing small yield. No Davy Crockett's, no exotic miniature nuclear arms. I don't think that'll happen. That would be I don't even think China. I don't think anybody would support Russia in those types of actions.
I disagree.
You think that China would support Russia? You think that?
Yes, hands down.
Wow.
I think the U.S. has already lost its position. Brazil and China just announced that they're going to be trading outside of U.S. dollars.
Yes,
China's brokered a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Like, the U.S. is in such a fractured position right now that I'm pretty sure China is just going to be like, Sucks to be you, United States.
I don't think it's about being in a fractured position. I think it's about, I don't think anybody wants to be in a country where people are shooting nuclear weapons, including China and everybody else in the world.
But it's going to be in Ukraine. This is what I'm saying. The U.S. will not. This was brought up by I think it was an EU politician. He said, if Russia uses lower yield nukes in Ukraine, the West will not respond with similar nuclear weapons or greater. Because
who cares what a EU politician says, though?
he said, no, who was this? It was like a UN guy or something. He said,
I don't care who it is. If it wasn't the U.S. president, UN has no fucking. Yeah,
no one is going to risk. What did he say? He says no one's going to risk like Warsaw for Kiev. No one. If Vladimir Putin escalates the conflict in Ukraine, Western forces will not escalate to the point where they would put their home countries at risk. They will keep the conflict in Ukraine.
Well, of course, but Ukraine's not a NATO country, so all we'll do is send stuff to help. But we're not going to be putting troops there. We're not going to be flying planes over there.
What they were saying is that if Putin uses nukes in Ukraine, the West will not fire nukes on Russia in return.
Fire nukes on Russia in return? I don't believe so. But wasn't Biden's initial claim that we'd be destroying like their fleet in the Black Sea or something if they were doing
well, we took out their flagship.
Yeah, I mean. But again, I wouldn't look to a UN or an EU politician to speak on behalf of the U.S. military or what the U.S. is willing to do. Because at the end of the day, that's really all that matters, right?
I agree with your principle that countries shouldn't be invading and colonizing territory. But then I look at what the U.S. did the last 20 years in Iraq.
We haven't done anything even remotely similar. We didn't take any territory.
They're not on our border. We have a puppet state in Iraq. We have corporations set up in Libya like Osprey.
Iraq holds their own elections. Iraq is its own country. We didn't take any territory from them. We didn't declare any of this. Like, this is now part of the United States. It's a totally different scenario from what's happening in Ukraine and Russia.
We removed the Ba'ath Party from power, which caused ISIS to appear. But I mean, you could say it's legit, but it's a puppet state.
I'm not saying it's legit, but I don't think we can call it a puppet state. I don't think it's fair. They hold their own elections. They are their own country. We might not like it. We did remove Saddam Hussein. We did ban the Ba'ath Party from reforming. That is true. But we didn't we didn't come in and say, like, we're going to carve off this part as like New Connecticut.
Right.
It's part of the United States now. That's an insane thing to do. Yeah. That's an insane thing to do. We haven't done that. Russia went into Ukraine and they took territory. This is Russia now. That hasn't happened in so long. It's an unprecedented action in this age, post-91, post-Soviet Union. That's insane.
Yeah, I think of it as like after the Soviet Union broke up, the oligarchs split it all up and they took away the warm water port from Russia because they didn't want it to be a global hegemon. They were like, no, we're going to give Sevastopol to Ukraine now. Russia's landlocked and they can have their other. And it'd be like in the U.S. if they took the West Coast and took a long strip down the West Coast of the U.S. and gave it to Canada and we had no Pacific access. That at some point the U.S. would be like, this is insane, and we're going to invade and take Pacific access. And that's where I see the Russians coming from.
Well, how? They recognize the border. That's the country. You might not like it, but...
It's just de facto, like
it's not de facto. It'd be like, what if Canada was like, we really want Alaska? This is bullshit. It's not even connected to the U.S. We're going to take this. You can't do that. That's the border.
Try.
They could try.
De facto, if we didn't have West Coast access.
I wish they'd fucking try.
The Canadians.
Well, yeah, no,
God, I would
guys,
just love to just win a war against Canada.
And it would give us pretext to seize Canada. We would end up taking Canada and annexing it into the United States.
No more land acknowledgements.
The way we did with Libya, the way we invaded, overthrew Gaddafi, took
we did that, but we did that with authorization through fucking through NATO and even through the UN. I'm pretty sure Gaddafi was so bad. I think even China would like abstain from voting no on that one. But again, I'm just saying that here's what I'm trying to say. There's something very unique in particular. I'm not saying that like because I know a bunch of people throwing out probably saying, oh, he wants Iraq and Afghanistan, blah, blah. I'm not saying those invasions were good. I'm not saying our occupation was good, but I'm saying there's something fundamentally different from invading a country and taking territory and saying, this land is mine now. Even in Iraq, even in Afghanistan, where we were for 7,000 years, we didn't actually say, this is U.S. territory now. Right? There were people there. They ran. They did their elections. They did their things. Eventually, we left. But like, it's not U.S. territory. Whereas that has happened with Crimea and Ukraine.
We almost took Mexico. I was watching this documentary on the Mexican-American War, and then Americans were actually in favor of just taking it, and we won. But then the president at the time, I can't remember who it was, Polk or something. He was like, nah, Mexico can stay Mexico.
The liberal economic order has been using is.
But we took Texas and stuff.
It's corporate colonization.
California.
They took out Gaddafi, set up the U.S. dollar, and all these American corporations like Sidney Blumenthal's Osprey Global Solutions. Hillary made sure that he got his defense contract in Libya. So they say, oh no, we're not taking that land. but it is profiting us massively because we have it set up as a corporate
Sure,
state.
I mean, everything profits us, but I mean, that's a fundamentally different thing again from like taking the land and being like, we're gonna.
I would argue
let's-
that colonizing corporately overseas is much worse than
you
taking
can
a
argue
piece
it's
of
much
land on
worse,
your border.
but it's still way different.
It's different, yeah.
It's different than like, this is U.S. land that we are now administering legally, and this is our land now. It's
But
weird.
if you legally say it's okay to invade and take something over, it doesn't make it okay to invade and take it over just because you said it was legal.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.